Video hook. November 3, 2024. Billionaire Marcus Thornton knelt at his son's grave in Seattle's Oak Hills Cemetery when he saw her. A 7-year-old black girl placing flowers on the headstone, whispering, "I'm sorry, big brother," to a boy she'd never been told existed. Marcus had buried his only child 3 years ago after a fatal car accident, convinced his son died alone and without family beyond himself. But this little girl's tear-streaked face and the locket around her neck told a different story. How could his son have a sister Marcus never knew about? And what secret had his late son been hiding that would connect him to a child the world said didn't exist? Part 1. Discovery at the grave. The November rain had finally stopped, leaving Seattle's Oak Hills Cemetery draped in gray mist. Marcus Thornton walked the familiar path toward his son's grave, his Italian leather shoes crunching against wet gravel. He came every Tuesday morning at 9, before the city woke fully, before board meetings and conference calls consumed his day. 3 years. 3 years since the accident that took Cameron from him. His only child, 22 years old, was killed when a drunk driver crossed the center line on Interstate 5. Marcus had built TechBridge Industries into a $7 billion empire, but none of his wealth could bring back the son he'd raised alone after his wife died during childbirth. As he rounded the corner near the oak tree that gave the cemetery its name, Marcus froze. A small figure knelt at Cameron's headstone. A little girl, no more than 7, her dark skin contrasting against a worn purple jacket. Her hair was pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, and she clutched a handful of dandelions, the kind children picked from sidewalk cracks, not the expensive arrangements from florists. Marcus's first instinct was to turn away, give her privacy. But something stopped him. The child was speaking, her voice barely audible but carried on the morning air. "I brought you flowers, big brother. They're not pretty like the ones you used to buy me, but I picked them myself." She placed the dandelions carefully against the marble. "Auntie says I shouldn't come here anymore. Says you were just somebody who helped us once. But I know different things. You promised you'd always be my brother." Marcus felt his heart hammer against his ribs. Big brother. The words didn't make sense. Cameron had no siblings, no cousins his age, no extended family to speak of beyond Marcus himself. He stepped forward, a twig snapping beneath his foot. The girl's head whipped around, her eyes wide with fear. She scrambled to her feet, backing away. "Wait," Marcus said, raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." But she was already running, her small frame disappearing into the mist between headstones. Marcus started after her, then stopped. Chasing a frightened child through a cemetery would only terrify her more. He turned back to Cameron's grave and knelt where she had been. The dandelions lay scattered across the wet grass. Behind them, partially hidden by the stone's base, was something that made his breath catch. A silver locket on a broken chain. Marcus picked it up with trembling fingers. The metal was tarnished cheap, the kind sold at discount stores. He pried it open. Inside were 2 photographs. One showed Cameron, younger, maybe 19, grinning at the camera with that easy smile Marcus remembered. The other photo showed the little girl, perhaps at age 4 or 5, sitting on Cameron's shoulders. Both were laughing. Marcus stared at the image, his mind refusing to process what his eyes clearly saw. His son, holding a child Marcus had never known existed. A child who called him Big Brother. He pulled out his phone and called his head of security, Vincent Hayes. The man answered on the first ring. "Vincent, I need you at Oak Hills Cemetery. Now. And bring whatever tracking equipment you have. I need to find a child." "Sir, just get here." Marcus remained kneeling, the locket clutched in his fist. His mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Cameron had been a good son, responsible and honest. If he had known about a sibling, he would have told Marcus. Wouldn't he? Unless he couldn't. Unless there was a reason to hide her. Vincent arrived within 20 minutes, accompanied by 2 other security personnel. Marcus showed him the locket. There was a girl here, 7 years old, black, purple jacket, 2 pigtails. She called my son her brother. His voice cracked on the last word. "I need to know who she is. Vincent studied the photo, his expression carefully neutral. "I'll check the cemetery's security footage. See if we can track where she went." She mentioned an aunt. Someone who told her not to come here. Marcus stood, his legs unsteady. "Cameron visited this grave before he died. I want to know why a child I've never heard of is mourning my son." The security team spread out, canvassing the area while Vincent worked his phone, coordinating with the cemetery's administration. Marcus walked the perimeter, his eyes scanning every shadow, every distant figure. Near the eastern gate he found something else. A small backpack, dropped behind a bench. Inside were a worn coloring book, broken crayons, and a school folder. The name on the folder read, Lily Patterson, Ms. Garcia's second-grade class, Riverside Elementary. Marcus's hands shook as he held the folder. Lily. The girl had a name now, and a school. Vincent appeared on his shoulder. "Sir, the footage shows her leaving through the east gate about 10 minutes ago. She got into an old Honda Civic, Washington plates. I'm running them now." "Do it quietly," Marcus said. "I don't want to scare her or whoever's taking care of her." But even as he said it, Marcus felt the weight of questions pressing down. Why had Cameron hidden this child? Who was taking care of her now? And why, 3 years after Cameron's death, was she still visiting his grave? That afternoon, Vincent returned to Marcus's downtown penthouse office with answers that raised even more questions. The car belongs to a woman named Brenda Patterson. Age 43, works 2 jobs. Housekeeping at Swedish Medical Center and night shifts at a grocery store. She lives in the South Seattle, Rainier Valley area. Low income, no criminal record. Patterson, Marcus repeated. Same last name as the girl. Could be her aunt like the kid mentioned. Or grandmother, though the age doesn't quite fit. Vincent hesitated. "Sir, there's something else. I did some digging into your son's movements in the years before his death. He made regular visits to that neighborhood. Monthly cash withdrawals, always the same amount, $2,000. Marcus's chest tightened. He was supporting them. It appears so. And there's more. Vincent slid a document across the desk. I pulled Cameron's phone records from the week before his accident. He made 17 calls to a social worker at Child Protective Services. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk. He was trying to get custody. Vincent nodded grimly. The night he died, he was driving back from a meeting with a family attorney in Tacoma. The accident happened at 11:47 p.m. He was probably exhausted, pushing himself to handle everything alone. Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The city sprawled below, indifferent to his pain. His son had been fighting for this child, fighting alone, and Marcus had known nothing about it. "Why didn't he tell me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know, sir. But if he was trying to adopt or gain custody, there might be legal records. Court filings, petitions." Marcus turned, his jaw set. "Find them. Find everything. I want to know who this child is, why my son was protecting her, and why she's living in poverty when my son died trying to save her." Vincent nodded and left. Marcus stood alone in his office, the locket still in his pocket. He pulled it out, staring once more at the photograph of Cameron and Lily, their smiles frozen in time. His son had loved this child enough to fight for her. Loved her enough to keep her secret, probably to protect her from something or someone. Marcus made a decision then, one that would change everything. He would find Lily Patterson. He would learn the truth about why she called Cameron her brother. And he would finish what his son had started. Because if Cameron had been willing to die protecting her, then Marcus would spend whatever remained of his life making sure she was safe. The rain began again, streaking the windows like tears. But Marcus Thornton wasn't crying. He was preparing for war. Part 2. The Approach. Marcus Thornton sat in his car outside Riverside Elementary for 3 days before he found the courage to approach. Not because he was afraid, fear had died in him the day they lowered Cameron into the ground. But because he didn't know what he would say to a 7-year-old girl who mourned his son like family. On Thursday afternoon, As children poured from the building in a chaos of backpacks and laughter, he spotted her. Lily walked alone, her purple jacket zipped to her chin, her head down. Other children ran past her, but she moved with the careful isolation of someone used to being overlooked. Marcus stepped from his car, his heart hammering. But before he could call out, a woman appeared, short, heavy-set, with graying hair pulled into a tight bun. She took Lily's hand, scanning the parking lot with the wariness of someone who expected trouble. Brenda Patterson. It had to be. Marcus watched them climb into the old Honda and drive away. He followed at a distance, Vincent's voice crackling through his phone's speaker. "Sir, I strongly advise against confronting them without legal counsel present." "I'm not confronting anyone. I'm just observing. That's what we call surveillance, and it's illegal without. I'm visiting a neighborhood. Perfectly legal." Marcus ended the call. The Honda pulled up to a narrow house in Rainier Valley, its paint peeling, the small yard overgrown. Marcus parked down the street and watched Lily and Brenda disappear inside. Lights flickered on in the front room. Just one lamp, he noticed, as if they were conserving electricity. He sat there until dark, then drove home to his penthouse, where Vincent was waiting with a thick folder. "You're not going to like this," Vincent said, spreading documents across the conference table. The first was a birth certificate. Lily Marie Patterson, born March 14, 2017, Seattle, Washington. Mother, Jessica Patterson, deceased. Father, unknown. Marcus's throat tightened. Jessica Patterson. Who was she? Cameron's girlfriend. From what I can piece together, they met when Cameron was 19, during his volunteer work at the Compass Housing Alliance shelter. Vincent slid over another document, a death certificate. Jessica died of complications from pneumonia 6 months after Lily was born. She was homeless, uninsured. By the time they got her to a hospital, it was too late. Marcus sank into a chair. His son had never mentioned a girlfriend, never brought anyone home. But then, Marcus had been consumed with the company back then, working 80-hour weeks, barely home for dinner. Brenda Patterson is Jessica's older sister, Vincent continued. She took Lily in after Jessica died, but she was barely making ends meet herself. That's when Cameron started the monthly payments. "For 7 years, Marcus whispered. "He supported them for 7 years. Until the accident. After that, the payments stopped. Brenda's been struggling ever since. She's behind on rent, utilities. The school has Lily enrolled in the free lunch program." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. While he'd been drowning in grief, retreating into his work, Cameron's daughter had been living in poverty. The granddaughter he'd never known existed. Wait, granddaughter? Vincent was Cameron. He couldn't finish the question. Vincent shook his head. Biologically, no DNA evidence suggests that. But legally and emotionally, he was filing to adopt her. I found the paperwork buried in family court records. Cameron had been working with an attorney for 2 years, trying to establish guardianship. But Jessica's family, Brenda specifically, was resistant. She thought Cameron was too young, too wealthy, that he'd take Lily away from the only family she knew. So he supported them instead, and visited every week. The neighbors I spoke to remembered him, said he'd show up every Sunday, spend the whole day with Lily, took her to the park, helped with homework, bought her clothes and toys. Vincent paused. They said she called him her big brother. Marcus closed his eyes. His son had built a life he'd kept secret, not out of shame, but probably to protect it. To protect Lily from the media circus that surrounded the Thornton name, from the scrutiny and judgment that came with wealth. "I need to meet her," Marcus said. "Properly this time. Not at a cemetery, not through a car window. That could be complicated. Brenda Patterson has every legal right to refuse contact. And given Cameron's relationship with her, she might see you as a threat." Marcus looked up sharply. "What relationship?" Vincent pulled out printed text messages, recovered from Cameron's old phone records. Marcus read them, his chest tightening with each exchange. "Cameron, Brenda, please. I can give Lily everything: education, stability, a future. Brenda, she has a future here, with a family who actually knows her. Cameron, I've known her since birth. I love her. Brenda, love isn't enough. You're 22 years old. You don't know what you're doing. Cameron, then let me learn. Let me be part of her life officially. Brenda, your father's a billionaire. What happens when the press finds out? When reporters camp outside her school? You want to put her through that? The messages went on, increasingly desperate on Cameron's side, increasingly defensive on Brenda's. The last exchange was dated 2 days before Cameron's death. Cameron, I'm filing the petition with or without your blessing. She deserves better than this. Brenda, then I'll fight you in court. And I'll win because no judge will give custody to a kid barely out of college. Marcus set down the papers, his eyes burning. Cameron had been fighting a war on 2 fronts, trying to convince Brenda to let him help, and trying to build a legal case strong enough to overcome her objections. And then he died, leaving both battles unfinished. Sir, Vincent said quietly, you should know, Brenda Patterson has no love for your family. In her mind, Cameron was trying to steal Lily. She might see you the same way. I don't care what she thinks, Marcus said, his voice hard. That little girl is my son's legacy. I tried, but Berkeley destroyed my notes. When Jessica died, he blamed her for waiting too long to seek treatment, made it look like patient noncompliance. Angela's voice cracked. I've lived with that guilt for 7 years. When I saw Cameron's complaint, I almost came forward. But I was scared of losing my job, my license. Why are you calling now? Because they're using that little girl to protect themselves. And I can't let them win. Angela paused. I kept copies of everything. My original intake notes, Jessica's vitals, time-stamped records showing she came to us first. I'll testify if you need me to. Marcus closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Thank you. I'll have my attorney contact you first thing in the morning. After hanging up, he sent a message to Patricia. We have our witness. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Marcus arrived early, Patricia at his side, Angela Ruiz's testimony documented and ready. Brenda sat in the hallway, her eyes red and swollen. When Shauna Berkeley entered with CPS's attorney, Marcus saw it. The flash of panic when she spotted Angela. She knew what was coming. The judge, a stern woman named Helena Park, reviewed the complaint. Ms. Crawford, you're alleging Mr. Thornton represents a safeguarding risk to Lily Patterson based on what evidence? Crawford presented the surveillance photos, Shauna's statement about Marcus's obsessive behavior. Then Patricia stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present context. Mr. Thornton is the father of Cameron Thornton, who supported Lily Patterson financially and emotionally for 7 years before his death. Mr. Thornton only learned of Lily's existence 3 weeks ago when he discovered her at his son's grave. She laid out the timeline, the locket, Cameron's adoption petition, the monthly payments. Then she called Angela Ruiz to the stand. Angela's testimony was damning. She described Dr. Berkeley's refusal to treat Jessica, the destroyed records, the cover-up. She presented her preserved documentation, evidence that Jessica Patterson had sought help and been deliberately turned away. Judge Park's expression grew colder with each revelation. She turned to Shauna Berkeley. Ms. Berkeley, are you aware that filing false CPS complaints is a criminal offense? Shauna's face was drained of color. I was acting on information. Information designed to silence a complaint against your husband. Judge Park's voice was steel. This court does not look kindly on weaponizing child welfare for personal gain. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Thornton, while I understand your connection to this child through your late son, I cannot approve guardianship without proper evaluation. However, she glanced at Shauna with open contempt. I am ordering Lily Patterson returned to Brenda Patterson's custody immediately. CPS will close this investigation. And Ms. Berkeley, you will be hearing from the State Bar. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus allowed himself one moment of relief. But he knew this wasn't over. The Berkeleys had tried to use the system to bury the truth. They'd failed. But desperate people made dangerous enemies. And Lily was still caught in the crossfire. Part 5. Legal battles and systematic obstacles. Lily came home 3 days after the hearing, and Marcus was there when Brenda brought her through the door. The little girl looked smaller somehow, her eyes hollow. Mr. Trunks clutched so tightly Marcus could see her knuckles whitening. She didn't speak, didn't look at anyone, just walked straight to her room and closed the door. She hasn't said a word since they took her, Brenda whispered, wiping her eyes. Not to me, not to the foster family, not to the CPS counselor who interviewed her. She's completely shut down. Marcus felt rage and helplessness war in his chest. The therapist at Seattle Children's. When can she start? Next week. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. She specializes in traumatized children. Brenda's voice cracked. But what if it's too late? What if we've broken her? We haven't, Marcus said firmly. She's survived worse. She'll survive this too. But even as he said it, he wondered if he was lying. The formal guardianship petition hearing was set for 6 weeks later. Patricia had warned Marcus it wouldn't be simple. Family courts moved slowly, deliberately, suspicious of sudden wealth entering poverty's equation. They'll question your motives, she said during their preparation meeting. Why now? Why this child? What do you gain? I gain the chance to honor my son's memory. That's not what they'll hear. They'll hear guilt, obligation, rich man playing savior. Patricia leaned forward. Marcus, I need you to understand. This judge will look for any reason to deny this. Wealth disparity, racial dynamics, the fact that you're a stranger to Lily. They'll paint you as disruptive to her stability. Her stability? She's living in a house with no heat, eating school lunches because there's no food at home, which is exactly what we'll argue. But we need to be strategic. Patricia pulled out documents. The state's attorney is arguing that throwing money at poverty doesn't solve trauma, that Lily needs consistency, not upheaval. They'll say you're well-intentioned but naive. Marcus's jaw clenched. What do we need to prove? That you're not replacing Brenda, you're supporting her. That this benefits Lily's emotional well-being, not just her material circumstances. And most importantly, Patricia met his eyes. That this is about Lily, not about easing your grief over Cameron. The opposition came from an unexpected source. At the preliminary hearing, a woman Marcus didn't recognize stood and requested to be heard. Judge Park allowed it. Your Honor, I'm Dr. Imani Lawson, child psychologist. I've been asked by the Children's Rights Coalition to provide expert testimony on this case. Patricia learned from Marcus. I don't know who she is or who's funding her. Dr. Lawson's testimony was clinical and damaging. Research shows that children in poverty who are suddenly exposed to extreme wealth experience significant psychological disruption, identity confusion, pressure to assimilate, loss of community connection. Lily Patterson has experienced multiple traumas. Introducing a wealthy, white male figure with no established relationship could be destabilizing. Patricia stood. Dr. Lawson, have you evaluated Lily Patterson? No, but have you spoken with her current therapist? I've reviewed general case notes. So you're testifying about a child you've never met, whose specific circumstances you don't know, based on broad statistical trends? Patricia's voice sharpened. Isn't it true that those same studies show that poverty itself is traumatic? That lack of access to healthcare, education, and basic resources causes long-term developmental harm. Dr. Lawson stiffened. Of course, and wouldn't removing those stressors, while maintaining the child's primary attachment figure, likely improve outcomes? In theory, but the research on transracial guardianship. Mr. Thornton isn't proposing adoption, Patricia interrupted. He's proposing resource sharing while Lily remains with her legal guardian. That's not transracial adoption. It's extended family support, which your research overwhelmingly endorses. Judge Park made notes, her expression unreadable. Ms. Walsh, does your client have any established relationship with the child? It was about a little girl who finally believed someone would stay, and Marcus Thornton intended to prove her right every single day for the rest of his life.